Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again, 100th time. It's always like opportunities to sort of appreciate where you are, and 100 episodes seem like a good one. So we're going to focus a little bit on ourselves and talk a little bit about the podcast. To do that, I have Teresa Bonifas, who is the Assistant Director of Constituent Media Services. Teresa, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Brad. Good to be back.
Very glad to have you. Very excited to talk about episode 100. Now, I know
we made it.
Technically, we've only started to record it. Let's see if we actually make it all the way through.
Fair enough.
And the thing goes to
I think we can do it.
I have faith in us. Now, I know you know this because obviously you have you listen intently to every one of these shows, but I like to make sure folks have an idea of who it is they're hearing from, and obviously you've kind of done this before. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start by having you share a little bit about your background, how you became the Assistant Director of Constituent Media Services.
Sure. So I have been with Chesterfield for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I started out as a public information officer, and over the years have kind of worked my way up to be now the assistant director. Prior to that, as I say, my previous life was in sports, as many people in our office it was, and we decided we needed to get out of that world. But
we did indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, my previous life was in sports. I worked in sports information. I went to school at JMU. Go Dukes, proud JMU alum. I worked there in their sports information office.
Right.
I went to grad school at VCU with a sports leadership degree, and
right.
then now I worked at Coastal Carolina. Again, determined that maybe the life in sports, while I do love sports, sports information was not for me, and so I transitioned to the government world. I started out the state, but then came to Chesterfield almost 10 years ago. So. Yeah. Here I am, and if you would have asked me, would you still be here 10 years later, I probably would have said, nah, no way. But here I am, and Chesterfield's been really good to me, and I just love what we do. I love the team and what we've really built here, including the podcast.
Yeah. It's funny though, because if you think about sort of your 10 years, 100 episodes, it's kind of all lining up for things to be celebrating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But Brad, part of this episode is I am going to ask you questions.
Yep.
So I'm going to turn the table on you. You ask all your guests, including me, a little bit about us and who we are and why we're sitting here. But I want to flip the tables and do that to you. So, Brad, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background and before, how you got here to sit?
This is a lot easier on the other side. I also went to JMU. Very proud of my time and very happy about my time in Harrisonburg as well. Loved every second of it. When I graduated with a political science degree and wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to do what I was trained to do, which was run campaigns. And so I had one skill, which is that I could write. And so I went to the local newspaper in my hometown of Emporia, Virginia, and I worked at the Independent Messenger there. Started out as a sports stringer, became a sports writer, became a sports editor, became a news writer. Kind of worked my way up over the years. Came to Richmond, worked at a handful of local publications in and around the area, and then had the opportunity to run a website that covers Virginia sports. And I did that for about 10, 11 years, somewhere in that ballpark, before I came to the county in 2021. Came here as a creative content writer, was extremely thankful to have that opportunity because in the world, not just the world of sports, but in you're doing anything sort of like on your own, even if you have like some staff writers or that kind of thing, it's such a different reality to sort of run your own shop. And that sounds, for a lot of people out there, I know that sounds like a fun thing, and it is to some extent, but it's so much nicer to be surrounded by a team full of folks who are like not just really good at what they do, but also just make it feel super comfortable, right? Super enjoyable time to be at work, to do stuff. You feel like you're doing something for like good for people. And so I have thoroughly enjoyed the time.
And little did you know you'd still be doing campaigns, just in a different way.
Just in a different way. Yeah, that's right. And still doing sports, Jim that's and I talking high school football on the podcast sometimes. But no, podcasting kind of came My dad had a background in radio, so audio kind of came naturally to me when I was running the website. We're covering UVA sports. I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to add more content for the website, so we launched a podcast. I believe it is the longest running independent podcast in the ACC, which is a fun little claim to fame.
Yeah.
And honestly, hundreds of episodes later, the opportunity to come here and launch something new was really fun, and certainly something for which I am extremely thankful. Now, I feel like in order to sort of tell the story of the podcast, we have to start from the beginning. So tell me a little bit about the idea of the podcast itself and how this whole thing came to be.
Sure. So the idea for the podcast is something that has always kind of been part of the mix, right? It's always been part of the discussion.
Right.
And at the first, and the blog is the same for that matter. At first, it was more of a wish list, a dream, something, we're going to get there one day. Right.
Right.
It was just, we knew we needed to do something. We needed to meet people where they were. Right. And that is something that I think our department has done a really, really good job at is, we take pride in the content that we put out because we put out really good content, but we also want to make sure that content is meeting people where they are. Right. And podcasting is something that is become very popular, as we all know. And so that was a space we knew we wanted to be in eventually. We just needed to figure out, how to get there, what equipment did we need, what are we going to call it, all the details, right? Right. And we also needed to make sure we had the right hosts. We had the right people that knew what they were doing. All those things kind of played into it. So it was something that just, again, it was that dream, that aspiration. Right. So I guess, rewind back, 3 years now?
3 years, yeah.
We were hiring for a creative content writer. And we ended up, long story short, we ended up hiring two. We ended up hiring Brad here and Jim McConnell, who runs our blog. And one of the things that is part of the interview process, Brad did a great job of talking about his writing and everything, but then he mentioned podcasting. And it was like,
yeah,
this could be good,
yeah,
right?
And in hindsight, Brad, good job.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, not that was the only reason why we hired you, of course, Brad, because Brad does many, many great things and is a great writer and contributes a lot to the work that we do. But the podcasting piece was very intriguing. So, we hired Brad. We said, oh, hey, guess what? By the way, we're going to start a podcast and you're going to be the host. Yeah. So here's what we have so far. Yeah. And, kind of walk us through that. And, I think it's been a good ride. Yeah, it has. I think, sure. We've really continued to let it grow and everything. But, so one of the big things that we actually, even before Brad, was we had to come up with a name, right? So
such a good story.
Yeah. So, in thinking back and kind of preparing for today, I was like, that name, Chesterfield Behind the Mic, that's how we all know it. Well, the story behind that, it was not always Chesterfield Behind the Mic.
Could have been a whole different thing, y'all.
It could have been. So, in fact, it was very much of a team effort. But we put out everybody kind of submitted names. We ended up doing like this online survey. So the choices, I guess, were Let's Talk Chesterfield. Okay. Or Chesterfield Insider or Chesterfield Behind the Mic.
We love to put Chesterfield. Do you ever notice that? We love to put Chesterfield.
It's a long word.
It is. It makes everything not fit on one line always.
But the two contenders were Let's Talk Chesterfield and then Chesterfield Behind the Mic. And truth be told, I think Let's Talk Chesterfield actually was the one that won. Right. As far as a vote. But I think, Brad, you and I were like, we're going to veto this. We have veto power. And so lo and behold, Chesterfield Behind the Mic was born, and that's what we've stuck with. And I think it's served us well.
It has. I mean, listen, spoiler alert, we're not going to rename the show here today. Like that's not here. We're not there for that. But I do think it's interesting that, like, as I remember that time frame, because you guys had conversations about the podcast, even leading into that summer and fall of when we launched it, it certainly felt like, that it was already baking a little bit. So even I remember even coming onto it, like, okay, Like they've done some groundwork and stuff, but then I think really quickly it became but is this the right way to do it? And think by that point it was very much a team effort in terms of.
I think one of your first assignments was, hey, Brad, here's the equipment we've looked at. Right. Is this the right stuff?
Yeah, is this what we need? Right. Yeah, how do we do this? Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, that was definitely one of my first sort of tasks was. So
we were getting there. You know, we were getting close, but I think. Again, with bringing you on board on the team really is what catapulted into motion. Yeah.
Now, in terms of launching a podcast, right? Mm-hmm. I remember the stress of, not only were you going to launch a podcast, right? You're going to launch a podcast that's video.
Yes.
Right? Which is a whole different
We did
animal,
launch as video,
right?
Yes.
Now, right now, Social has video running of us. I don't know if she's using this somewhere or not, but the reality is that like I had done a lot of podcasting and approximately zero of it had been on camera. So there was a real adjustment for me in the sense of, all right, I'm launching a podcast, which I know very well. And that part I was comfortable with. I'd done a lot of radio. I've done a lot of stuff like that. So being on an audio format, completely cool. Then they added a camera and I was like, oh, and so I have to like talk to it and I have to like not look at my notes and I have to know what I'm doing and I can't, fumble around. That was daunting, if not harrowing, right? Like it was scary. And about this time we were trying to figure out, what was going to be our first topic and how was all that going to take shape. And the softball team goes into the Little League World Series and I remember he was like, hey guys, I think this is it. I think this is what we ought to do. Now, I don't know if like
no brainer.
I don't know if subconsciously a part of me was like, hey, this is sports-ish. And I feel like, that was kind of like my comfort zone. I had to do this big scary thing with cameras and whatnot, but it was like, hey, but this is also kind of sports, so maybe that'll be okay. But we did it on location, which was in and of itself, a whole other thing, right? Because now you're not just figuring out logistics of like, oh, where do I put the mic and how does this look on camera? But then it's also like, oh, by the way, it's 105 degrees in the shade. And I don't know if anybody knows this.
Hot.
Listen,
day.
I don't need an invitation to sweat. Like, I don't need any extra reason to do this. Like, I'm hot-natured by it's 50-some degrees outside right now and kind of drizzling, and I could walk outside in short sleeves and be completely fine.
Fun fact about Brad, if you remember the episode with Dominion.
Yes.
And they said where you should keep your thermostat in the summer, I think Brad almost fell out the chair.
Yes. He was, what was he? Did he say 78? Is that what he said?
76.
It was a lot. Just no chance. But no, launching a podcast on video outside in the sun was probably one of the most rewarding experiences of my career, in large part because getting a chance to do something that you haven't done before, getting the challenge of doing it like this, and you really there was no like, oh, you know what, if it's not any good, we can try it tomorrow. Nope, we had lots of people out there. This was the time we had the field. We're going to go and we're going to do it, and we got to go. So after we figured out,
and with video, you have to do live to tape.
Yeah, and it's like and it's like little things like, where's the power, right? So like we had to run an extension cord, like 40 yards, or it felt like But all in all, that first episode got off the ground, and it felt very similar to what we do now. Right now, we over time have come back and it made it a little bit more audio driven, and we'll talk a little bit more of that as we go. But that first one, it felt sizable, but also comfortable, if that makes any sense. Like, even though it was outside of my comfort zone, I didn't feel like I was over my skis. It just felt like I was doing something new. And I knew I had a great group of people around me. And I think if there's going to be a point I hit over and over again, is that like, this thing does not happen without talented people all over this department and division who care about Chesterfield, who care about the stories we're telling, who care about the people we're talking to, the people we're interviewing. And we are always trying our best to make sure that comes through in the work we do. And it was incredible to be a part of that team, to have that support, to launch something new. And then the excitement around it that sort of just kind of happened as we sort of continued to move forward. That part for me was especially
well, and from my side, kind of going back to the history of the podcast.
Right.
We hired Brad in August of 2021.
That's right.
The podcast, the first episode, was in September of 2021.
September 21st, if I remember.
So again, we had been preparing this, but again, I was not lying when I said Brad's first assignment was
literally go do this.
Make sure we get this done. And like you said, the softball World Series just really, it probably made that timeline a little bit quicker than what we initially wanted to, but it just really made sense.
Yeah.
And so again, telling those stories, that's the purpose of this podcast, is to tell those stories.
Yeah.
And so I think, that it was a no-brainer that, hey, this is the first one. And the first one being a community episode,
right,
I think was really impactful as well.
Right. Yeah.
So continuing on down this line, Brad, I know, a lot goes into doing a podcast, and you've kind of talked about that a little bit, but maybe we can kind of peel back the onion a little bit more.
You want me to tell all the, tell how all the sausage is made?
Well, maybe don't tell all the industry secrets, right?
Yeah,
but,
maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
But, I think one of the reasons this podcast is so successful is because of the work that you put in, a lot of it up front, behind the scenes.
Right.
Can you kind of give people a glimpse as to what that looks like in preparing for the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, so first off, a lot of the work for the podcast goes in well in advance of anybody ever sitting down behind a microphone, right? Because a lot of it comes down to topic selection, right? How do we pick the topics that we talk about? Or the topics that we feature? The things we want to talk about are driven sort of in large part, I guess, by the county's, the sort of larger things in play, right? So there are certain times a year that certain episodes make the most sense, right? And there are also times of year where there are certain events, right, where that you want to focus on this or you want to focus on that. But there are also times when you need to be mindful of like what is happening, what kind of things make sense to be featured, what kind of stories present themselves. Sometimes it's just sort of by chance that you get something incredible, You're just kind of minding your own business one day, and then, oops, a person from Chesterfield just was on Wheel of Fortune or is going to be on Wheel of Fortune, and you'd love to feature them and that kind of thing. So what I try to do and certainly, again, it goes back to the team. It's not just any one person coming up with ideas. It's everybody, all through not just our division or our department, but the entire organization as a whole. And then once we have those ideas, we sort of figure out what time frame makes sense, and then that's when it becomes time to sort of iron out who am I talking to. Different people are comfortable behind microphones, and some of them aren't, right? And especially for I guess it's kind of true for community and government stories. In both instances, there's a really good chance that the person who is sitting across from me, this is the first time they've ever, talked on a microphone, heard their own voice in their ear while they did so, right? And so there's a lot of comfort that you're trying to not just to sort of nurture within them, but also to sort of make sure that they understand that like nobody's out to get anybody. Like the idea behind this show is to be informative, to be entertaining, but it's not meant to be always super duper serious. And
it can be daunting sitting here with the lights on you. And
in the old days when we first started and there's video, right?
Yes.
That was a very different ask for people. Like, hey, come on the podcast, talk to me about whatever. And then also, by the way, every light in the universe is going to feel like it's on. This room is extremely small. And it heats up fast. And did I mention that I don't need an invitation to be hot? But then also to be serious for a second though,
you got to worry about what you are wearing,
right? Yes, exactly.
There's the video aspect definitely probably those first guests. It was probably a little bit of a harder ask in some ways. Yeah.
No, but now audio driven I think is different in the sense that like now people are just hyper aware of how they sound, and certainly we do what's called live to tape, and the idea behind live to tape is essentially. We record this as if it is just one conversation, right? Now, if I'm in the middle of asking Teresa a question here in a second and my brain just completely blue screens, that's not going to make it into the edit, right? I'm going to cut that out because I'd rather not look, silly in front of.
That's the blooper reel,
right? But, but overall, like nobody says like, hey, could you do that again, but with a little more feeling? Like that's not how this works, right? And I think people can hear what is an authentic conversation, what's not. And so one of the things we really strive to do is to make sure that we prepare as best we can, that the guest is comfortable, that everybody's sort of clear on like where we want to go and sort of what we're like, what's the thing we're trying to get across with this episode, right? And certainly when we're planning these out and when we're putting the pieces together, one thing that we are mindful of is that a lot of our guests are going to be new to podcasting. And this is a medium that maybe for them, they've wanted to try, like I recently had Cara Durden on from Internal Audit.
Right.
And that's probably not one that gets a lot of opportunities to sort of present sort of their the work they do in front of, let's say regular folks, right? Numbers people, sure. Process people, sure. But like regular folks, maybe not. And so I think that I'm also mindful that like when these different departments and especially folks from the community get this opportunity, it's really important to them. And so we treat it seriously, but we also try to make sure that we're there as comfortable as possible and we make sure they have a little fun in the process. Once the episode is recorded, then it goes into the edit, which I do the edit on the audio side. Martin, who is my director, he does the edit on the video side. So for these audio-driven podcasts, he takes that audio, he lays it down, and then he figures out what visuals to put over top of them. And it really does enhance the podcast in a variety of ways. So if you're somebody who is primarily just listening to the show on your app of choice, definitely, give us a look at our YouTube channel or on the website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast, because you get a chance to sort of see and feel a lot more from the episodes than just what we say on the microphone. And I think having that duality and knowing that we're going to have that duality helps us a lot in terms of planning out these episodes, in terms of what content we cover, in terms of what stories we tell, and the way in which we tell those stories.
Well, and Martin does it, first of all, the fact that we put it on YouTube and as an audio piece, I think really, again, illustrates that point of we're trying to meet people where they are.
Right.
Whatever medium that is, platform that is. And, I will say Martin does a really great job of finding very relevant images or B-roll, things like that to accompany
a
lot of the podcasts. Yep. And I think the video version on YouTube really is, it's a strong way to watch the podcast.
Yeah. Especially in those episodes where, the stuff we're covering is in any way, shape, or form dense.
Right.
Because then as somebody is explaining something to you, you're able to see something on screen. And that does help a lot. And I know, I've talked to folks who say they really like to watch it. I've talked to folks who really like to listen to it while they're driving or while they're cutting grass or whatever. And I love the fact that we, again, to your point earlier about meeting people where they are, I love that we serve both those options and we don't make people choose. They can either do one or the other or or
do both.
Listen, if you want to listen and you want to watch, I'm not going to stop you.
No.
Right?
We'll take it.
We'll be more than happy to let you do that.
So going back to topics.
Okay.
So, 100 episodes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, did you ever think we would make it to 100?
Yes,
I mean, I did.
Well, I had to. Right? I had to hope that we'd get there.
It does seem like quite the milestone. But what were some of your favorite government topics and guests that you've covered over the years?
I certainly enjoy, and this is going to sound funny, but I certainly enjoy the opportunity to get somebody involved who otherwise this is just not a thing that they do, right? Somebody like Missy from elections. I mentioned Cara, Stephanie Brown from procurement. The recent one we did with Gerard and Consuela about the Triple Crown. Mm-hmm. Those are fun for me in the sense that like I like featuring things that one, don't get a whole lot of ink anywhere else. And then two, you're going to put people in positions where like typically they're not behind microphones, right? And then three, honestly, I kind of enjoy the ones where I learn a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes, I'm trying to kind of, as any sort of host would do, you're trying to get your hands around sort of what this topic is and what it's not. And so you can lead a discussion in the right way. And what I kind of enjoy is sometimes being the eyes and ears of the listener, right? It's like letting them say a thing and then reacting to it like they might at home or, in the car or cutting grass, whatever.
Right.
Because if they say a thing that's interesting to the listener, I want to be able to know when that's going to be and try to pull that out. Mm-hmm. And so I actually, a lot of those kind of topics are really fun for me. I also very much enjoy anytime we can sort of be, I don't want to say make government less governmenty, but I like being able to sort of be as human in that, right?
Well, you get to show the personalities.
Right, exactly. So anytime I get Gerard or Matt Harris on here, we're going to have fun. I love sitting down with Jim McConnell, regardless of whether we're talking high school football or our year in review podcast we do every year. That for me is a lot of fun. But for me, a lot of the government stuff is fun simply because it's such a great opportunity to connect what we do here with what people out there need to know. And I think that's a lot of fun.
Well, and with the government piece, again, some of these topics, they take some time to kind of explain. And I think the podcast does a good job of giving it that time.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now, from the community side, listen, Wheel of Fortune, Carrie Brockwell.
There's been some good ones.
The kids who did the robots over at the library.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I mean, that was so much fun. I just have had so much fun getting to know so many different people, getting the chance to talk to them. I'd recently talked to Sherry Searles, who is the Christmas mother, who is a super dynamic person and has a great story to tell. That episode will be coming out soon. But that's just a great example of like I've gotten to talk to all the Christmas mothers for each year.
I know.
And it's interesting to see, they have such similarities, but then where their differences are. I've gotten a chance to talk about a lot of important topics, domestic violence, things that are super serious in a way, that involve the community, even if maybe sometimes they're not like community stories, but then the opportunity to then bring the community in here and talk about something that goes out there. America DeLoach, to talk about the Latino farmers market. Yep. She was dynamic and had such a great time talking to her. If it's funny because all 100 on some level really matter, right? And the maybe the segments of the population or the people who might be very interested in this topic or that one, the fact that we cover all of those bases and the fact that we are never week to week, we're not the same.
I'll say you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I kind of love that we have that versatility,
right,
and that we play to all of those different places.
Yeah, and we try to mix it up to where you're not getting a government topic every single time. We really, that's part of sort of the planning out that editorial calendar is determining, okay, we've had several government topics. Let's try to get a community topic.
Try to mix some of that in.
I know one of the most fascinating, the Wheel of Fortune one by far was, it was just fascinating.
Yeah. And an award-winning one at that. Yeah,
that's true. It was award-winning, but just the journey and the process you got to go through to be on that. And I mean, same with Carrie Brockwell and talking through the American Idol process.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, and we just know what we see on TV, right?
Right. Yeah. And what's funny about both of those is like, and I swear this is not me just trying to be like humble or whatever. Those two ladies, Tamika and Carrie, like you could, an eggplant could have been sitting here and interviewed, because their stories are just so dynamic.
Oh yeah.
As a host, you're just trying to stay out of the way. You're just trying to stay out of the way and let them tell the story because they're so dynamic at what they do. We're running a touch long, so let me move us to a couple here at the end. First, Teresa is executive producer of the show. I'm curious, where do you think we go beyond episode 100? Where is the Captain Kirk frontiers on the other side?
That's a good question.
Where do you want to see the podcast go from here?
That's a tough question. I would like to see more video. I know we've kind of talked through that. I would love to see us take the show on the road a little bit more.
Right.
I think, we have the ability to do it. I think you get the ambiance, maybe, it's just a little bit of a different feel when you're out in the field somewhere or out on site somewhere besides just in a studio. I think the biggest thing is really continuing to evolve. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, where we started 100 episodes ago and where we are now, it is very different. But continuing to evolve, grow our following. We want people to be listening or watching our podcast. So making sure that we're getting it out there and in the best way. And I mean, I guess I want to be a leader, right? I want to be one of the, I like to say industry leader, but I'm going to say government sector leader of podcasts. Right. I know there's a lot of government entities that are getting into podcasting. We've been there, right? We are there.
Right.
And I want people to look at us of like, wow, this is a great podcast and benchmark with us.
Yeah.
So Brad, flipping the switch.
Okay.
As the host, what are some of your goals for the future for the podcast?
Well, you mentioned video. One thing I'm really interested to try to do, and I'm not sure exactly how to execute on this yet, but it's certainly something that I'm interested in. So when we first started, video podcasting was kind of not really the way it was working, right? Audio podcasting was kind of the way. That was the sort of bread and butter of what people considered a podcast. And so we sort of pivoted and we went to an audio-driven format for a good while. And during that time frame, there have been, I think it's more prevalent now. YouTube has sort of embraced podcasting in a different way. So your point about video, I think one of the things I'd like to do is to try to do more what I would call video capture. So not so much a direct-to-camera sort of thing, but more about like you're able to see the personality, right? If people could watch Jim and me record some of those podcasts and see that camaraderie. If they could,
well, they did get a taste of that.
That's true.
Lina, one of our newest employees, has done a good job.
She's done a great job, and hats off to her because she makes me compelling, which I always appreciate. But I just think that the more video we can do, the better. I think for me, the opportunity to continue to push forward into the community, to keep pushing and trying to find those other stories to tell. And certainly, as we go forward, and we've got, 100 episodes under our belt, Dr. Casey always likes to talk about don't rest on your laurels, right? And I would love for us to continue to sort of not just branch out in terms of, all right, where are we going to record it? How are we going to record it? What's it look like? What's it feel like? What's it sound like? But then also not just the topics we're covering, but how are we covering those topics, right? What elements can we bring to it? We've had music on the show before. Mm-hmm. Would love to do more of capturing things aside from just two people sitting at a desk, right? So those elements, I think, are things that we're certainly on the lookout for. And
are you trying to get people to sing and dance too?
I don't know about the dancing, but I think any sort of audio endeavor, the more rich you can make the sound.
Absolutely.
I'm a nerd when it comes to a lot of this kind of stuff too. So I'm very much appreciative of any opportunity we have to sort of.
Brad, I'm not going to sing or dance today, so sorry about your luck.
Well, speaking of, let's get you out of here on this one. Is there anything else you want people to know about the podcast?
We'll definitely listen, subscribe, do whatever you need to do. No, but in all honesty, I think the biggest thing is I just really want to thank and let our staff know how appreciative I am of all their hard work. Brad, you've been a phenomenal host for 100 episodes and hopefully continue to host for several more 100 episodes. Yeah. But, we've got, everybody in our department, they play a role in this
they touch
podcast,
it in some way.
And they touch it in some way. And so I think that, just the effort that everybody puts into this to make a good product is amazing. And I'm just so thankful to be part of this team and part of this group that puts this out. Are all of our past guests. Thank you. We would not be doing this without our past guests.
Yep.
We would not be at 100 episodes.
No, we would not.
And I don't think we've been told no yet. I think everybody has accepted our invitation.
Yeah.
So hopefully that continues.
Yep.
And of course, county leadership allowing us to do this.
Yeah.
And
seeing
giving
the value
us,
in it. Yeah.
Seeing the value, giving us the ability to do this.
Yeah.
I think is something that not everybody has, and something that I know I'm very appreciative of, and I know actually we all are, because we get a lot of support from our county leadership.
Yeah. I would also say that if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, wait till the end, right? Because there's a bunch of names at the end, and those folks all work really hard to make sure this thing, it's not just any one person. It's a team effort, to Teresa's point. And if you're listening to it, go into your podcast app of choice. There's a reason there's a credit section at the end, because a lot of people work on this, and it matters to them. And I also want to just say thank you to everybody who touches this thing, because we would not have gotten to 100 episodes if it had been just me. That's for sure. I really appreciate everybody who works on this. Martin, especially, who works on the video side. Certainly appreciate Jim and everybody who help us on the content side. And honestly, I want to thank you, because there's just no way that this thing exists without your support, without your guidance. Teresa's the last voice to listen to the thing before we say, yep, that's good for the public. And there have been lots of times where she has made each episode dramatically better, simply because she has a perspective that I find invaluable. So I want to thank you publicly for that, because that's super helpful, and it means a lot to me. And
we all have the same goal, to put out a great product.
Absolutely.
So. And I will just say, we are always accepting topic ideas.
Yes, for sure.
Content. So please reach out to us. If it's a community story, a government story, whichever,
yes,
we will take them all. We are always looking for content.
Yes. We
have a long list.
We do.
But that list is fluid, and so we're always looking for great stories to tell. Yeah,
Chesterfield.gov/podcast. In a second, I'm going to go through the thing at the end. But there's a reason why every episode ends that way, because when we say we want you to reach out and make suggestions, we really mean it. Like, if you have an idea, send it in. If it's an idea we've done before, or if it's an idea that we've heard before, that doesn't matter. I would much rather you ask or you send it in and say, hey, is this something you guys would be interested in? Because chances are pretty good we're going to say yes.
Absolutely.
So, well, Teresa, thank you very much for coming back on the show and talking to us about the show. That's fun.
Yeah, no problem, Brad. Thanks for having me.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield. On Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that you get your shows. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we greatly appreciate that. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make those suggestions, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. 100 episodes down.
Woohoo!
From blogs to podcasts, newsletters to alerts, social media, the latest community news, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.